Welcome to the pre-worship experience. It's now known as The Scene.
Good evening. We are here joined by our very special guest as we talk about people making a difference in the community. The thing that I love about this platform, Derek, is we get an opportunity to hear about the phenomenal lives and things that our very own members do. And so we are joined by Miss Gerry Gordon Brown and Mr. Dave Matheis, and they co-authored a book called A Celebration of Families, Stories of Parents with Disabilities. And Miss Gerry sits over here faithfully every Sunday. And one Sunday, Miss Gerry made her way to me with a red package and said, Miss Crystal, here, I need you to interview me about this book. And when I went home later that night, I had an opportunity to thumb through it, and I was blown away. What a book about overcoming. And so we are here joined by both of them tonight, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it. But Miss Gerry, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit, or kind of just say hello to everyone? And how long have you been a member of St. Stephen Church?
Oh gosh, many years. Mm-hmm. I'm a transfer from New Zion Baptist Church. Yes. My family here, but we've been knowing, of course, about St. Stephen for years.
Yes.
Okay. And all my family belongs here. Mm-hmm. As far as our book is concerned, which is so wonderful, I want to say that our editor, Mr. Dave Matheis, can give you some background information, and then I will talk about maybe a couple of stories and my story in this book.
Absolutely.
Okay. It's very diverse.
Very diverse. And that's what we absolutely love. Mr. Dave, hey, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. So tell us all about this project and how Miss Gerry came to be a part of this, anthology of love.
Sure. For one thing, first, Gerry and I have known each other for 40 years.
Oh, wow. 40 years?
We have a lot of history.
Oh, Miss Gerry, you don't look old enough to know someone that long.
For 40 years, right.
Well, we were both about 5 years old.
Yeah, I get
it. I work at the Center for Accessible Living. It's a disability resource center downtown on Muhammad Ali. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about the experiences of some of the staff with disabilities who became parents, and some of the bias and the discrimination they faced along the way. Mm-hmm. A couple had experienced calls to Child Protective Services just because they had disabilities, basically. Wow. So we decided maybe we'd put a book together, mm-hmm. and that was how we started. And what we ended up with is 30 stories in a book about 30 families. Wow. Where one or two of the parents, one or both of the parents has disabilities.
Wow.
And I know most of them. Mm-hmm. 22 of the 30 stories are about Kentuckians, mm-hmm. and about 8 of the stories are from Louisville residents, like Gerry. So
wow.
That's how awesome. It came to be, I think. And can I tell you about how we did it?
Please tell me how we did it, and then how you got Miss Gerry to participate in this.
Sure. Well, I started with I know most of the people. Mm-hmm. So, of course, this is during COVID.
Yeah.
The height of COVID. We did Zoom interviews with about 2/3 of those parents. Mm-hmm. And then I took the transcript from the Zoom interview and kind of organized it into a comprehensive narrative. About 8 of the people, 8 of the parents submitted their stories to me directly for inclusion. Gerry was one of those folks.
Okay.
But she sent me her story, and then we had coffee on her back porch one day. Mm-hmm. And I learned more about her story, so we kind of expanded a little bit. Yeah. For instance, She told me she went to school with Muhammad Ali.
What?
I couldn't keep that out of the story. We had to get that in there.
Absolutely. And people may not know, but Miss Gerry, tell them about your disability, though. People may not realize that you have a disability.
Right, because it's an unseen disability.
Yes.
But my disability is a bilateral hearing impairment, profound, okay, and I was born this way.
Yeah.
Okay. And I became a single parent, and I raised a beautiful daughter.
Amen.
And then also, I am a former client of Bureau of Vocational Rehabilitation, and I went to Kentucky State
Yeah.
and
Miss
graduated
Gerry?
with a bachelor's degree in sociology.
Wow.
And then also, I went to Webster University for a master's.
Come on.
Okay. And then from there, I have 2 years certification from Gallaudet University in Washington to be a peer mentor for the deaf and hard of hearing.
Oh, my gosh.
That is amazing.
Yes,
That's amazing.
Thank
So
you.
I just want to ask Miss Gerry, what was your driving force? What kept you going? What gave you some people with disabilities just stop.
Yeah.
They believe what they're told
Come on.
and that they're disabled and they
Yeah.
can't do what anybody else can do. But you didn't do that. You overcame that. So what was your passion? What was your drive? Where did you get that from?
I always wanted an education. And that was the most difficult situation for me because most of my teachers in my day, by the way, I was born in 1940.
Okay.
So the teachers were females.
Yeah.
And that's where my biggest problem is. Soft-spoken females and males, okay? But I always wanted to go away to school. And then I had a wonderful counselor, Miss Cecil Holmes, who really stuck with me and really pushed me forward. I did have to take a time out because of my hearing loss. It went down. You know, when you have colds, your head, it can cause problems.
Yes, ma'am.
But I always wanted to go to school.
Wow.
So that was
you
just,
did it.
I was determined to do that.
Yes.
Determined to do that.
And you
because
did that.
I
You
knew
did
that it was going to be hard for me to get a job. And I knew that if I had a proper education, then I could get a good job.
Yes.
Okay, at least a decent one anyway.
Yeah.
And I left Commonwealth of Kentucky as a director of the Client Assistance Program, which was a small program for persons with disabilities. Okay.
That is
I worked for 20 years plus.
Y'all give Miss Gerry a hand. That is amazing.
And so, Miss Gerry, talk about this book, A Celebration of Family, Stories of Parents with Disabilities. So you not only was dealing with a disability, but you was a single parent. Being one of those things is very hard, but being two of them at the same time. Talk about how you navigated that.
Well, I did experience being an African-American woman.
Yeah.
I did experience some prejudice, some racism.
Yeah.
To give you a few examples of what I experienced, one of the situations, and it was all in the work situation, okay?
Yeah.
One of the situations was a job that I had in Jeffersonville, Indiana.
Oh, that's where I was.
And I was on the staff, professional staff, and by the way, I was the only African-American on staff.
Yeah.
And this particular morning, I don't know why this young man chose to do this, but he passed out an application for the N-word and laid it on my desk and everybody's desk. Okay, that's one situation. Then when I came home, it was June, like very hot, very humid, and my grandsons were playing t-ball in Shawnee Park. And I went to the park to watch them play, okay? Overcame by the heat, had to be taken to a local hospital here. And by the time I got to the hospital, I was coherent, and I could, answer all the questions from the nurse. But later on, my insurance would not pay my hospital bill.
Wow.
So what I decided to do was to appeal that decision.
Come on, Miss Gerry.
Okay, so I appealed the decision but I had to get my records. So I got my records, and in my records, I'll never forget this, the nurse had stated that I was mentally retarded.
No.
Oh, my God.
and that I had a hysterectomy, and both of those are not true. So I had to get an attorney and have that removed. And at that time, remember Mr. Darrell Owens?
Yes,
He was the lawyer. He was the lawyer for me, and he got it in a phone call, one phone call.
I know, that's right. What a wonderful story. What a wonderful story. If you're just now joining us, we are joined by our very own Miss Gerry Gordon Brown and her editor, Mr. Dave Matheis, and they're talking all about this new phenomenal book that talks about families with disabilities. Mr. Dave, you know, you said you've got 30 stories in this book along with Miss Gerry's stories. Gerry or Dave, what are other stories, any other stories that come to mind that you were truly inspired by?
All of the stories tell about our experiences, okay? And what we feel that this book is so very important because there's no book on the market talking about parents of disabilities.
Yes.
You have parents of all sorts, but not with our disabilities.
Right. Yes.
And this is why we want this out there in full force. Everybody in the book has a disability. They may not have started out with a disability, but acquired one later in life. Okay. And then, like in my situation, well, it was from day one.
Right.
So we had, and our children were very, very supportive.
Yeah.
It was a learning experience for them, and they loved their parents. And then, of course, you know, as parents, give us opportunities, and we can talk about our children from now to never.
I know,
Right.
that's right.
So I wanted to ask, how would you get a copy of this? If you want to get it out, how do you get a copy of this book? How would I get a copy of this?
Okay, for one, you can order it from Amazon.
Okay.
Okay, and I think it's $10.95 or $10.11,
Okay.
but not over $10, not over 10. And then, of course, Carmichael's bookstore, especially the one on Frankfurt Avenue.
All right. Dave, one of the stories in here really stuck out to me, and the title of it was something like, I never thought about not being a parent. And so it was such a beautiful tale about how they did not allow them having a disability from having their own family. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes, and I'm not sure which one that is exactly, but a lot of the parents talk about, several of the women with disabilities talk about how they were advised that they couldn't have parents, couldn't have children. And they kind of met that kind of bias from the beginning and persevered because that was something they always pictured them doing. The first book in the story, story in the book, I'm not used to television.
It's okay. You're doing good.
You're doing well.
The first story in the book is who the book is dedicated to. Her name is Chastity, and I knew Chastity for years in Frankfurt. One of the best attitudes I ever had. She was born without an arm and a leg, and a hernia. And she spent her first 2 years at Shriners Hospital in Lexington. It almost became her family. So I interviewed her in May, I think it was 2020, and she died within 6 weeks of the interview. So that's why we dedicated the book to her. And she was one. She just was one of the funniest people I met. But she had to have her hernia repaired, and something went wrong. But she talks about how doctors had always. Well, first off, she talked about how her parents were told, well, she's not going to live past 2. She's not going to live past 4. She's not going to live past 10. And you know, finally the doctors gave up on killing her off, and she made it to adulthood.
Right.
And the doctors told her she can never conceive and have a baby. And then her occupational therapist at one time said, well, you've probably been told you can't have a baby. That's not true. You can be pregnant. There's no problems. You'll just have to have a C-section. And her response was, that's fine with me.
And the rest was history.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow. The rest was history.
Wow. Well, listen, we're running short on time. We've got to get out of here. Miss Gerry, I want to give you the last word. What message do you have to people about overcoming obstacles and why they should not allow anything to stop them from being who God has called them to be? What would you say?
I think my one message would be to anyone who's thinking about being a parent or one who's already a parent is to just be determined and let nothing stop you. And just do it.
That's it. Just do it.
Do it. Just do it.
Just like Nike. Just do it.
Hey, be sure to get this book. Support Miss Gerry. She's our very own. Get this book today, A Celebration of Family, Stories of Parents with Disabilities, and it's available on Amazon. And we're going to see something about seeing if we can get this available here at the church so people can get their own copy. And I'm going to tell you what, Miss Gerry was determined to be on the scene, and she is here today, everybody. And we are so glad about it. Thank you so much for blessing us with your story.
And welcome, Brother Dave, to St. Stephen's, okay? Welcome.
you so
Glad to
much.
have you both.
All right.